The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with quiet conversation as representatives from 47 different species took their seats. Ambassador Lisa Grant adjusted her simple blue uniform and checked the time on her datapad. Another routine session about trade regulations and shipping routes. She had been Earth's representative for 12 years, and most days felt exactly like this one. The chamber was a massive dome of crystal and metal, floating in space between 3 star systems. Each species had their designated area, with translation devices humming softly to convert thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Lisa sat in the human section, which consisted of exactly 1 chair. Earth had never needed more than 1 representative. "The session will now begin," announced Speaker Valdris, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. The Keltorian species had run the council for over 1,000 years, and they were very good at making sure nothing interesting ever happened. Lisa pulled up her notes on her tablet. Today's agenda included discussions about mineral rights in the Outer Rim, new safety protocols for cargo ships, and a complaint from the farming worlds about shipping delays. Standard stuff. Earth would vote yes on everything, contribute their required food supplies to the common market, and everyone would go home happy. That was how things had worked for 3,000 years. The peaceful routine was interrupted when Ambassador Thex from the Altarian colonies requested emergency speaking time. The small gray-skinned alien looked nervous as he approached the central platform. "Honored representatives," Thex began, his voice shaking slightly. "The Zephyrian Empire has made demands of our colonies. They want us to pay tribute in exchange for protection. When we refused, they attacked 3 of our settlements." A murmur went through the chamber. The Zephyrians were a militaristic species, but they usually kept their aggressive behavior within legal boundaries. Ambassador Corex, the Zephyrian representative, stood up. He was nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and small red eyes. "The Altarian colonies exist in Zephyrian space," Corex said in a deep voice. "They have benefited from our protection for decades without paying their fair share. We simply asked for reasonable compensation." "You destroyed our farms," Thex replied, his voice getting stronger. "You killed civilians, including children." "Accidents happen during legal enforcement actions," Corex shrugged. Lisa felt her stomach turn. She had seen the reports from the attacked colonies. Burned settlements, destroyed hospitals, families fleeing in damaged ships. But according to galactic law, the Zephyrians had the right to collect tribute from worlds in their territory. Speaker Valdris looked uncomfortable. "This matter requires careful study. We will form a committee to investigate the situation and provide recommendations within 6 months." 6 months, Thex's voice cracked. "They will destroy everything we have built in 6 months. The law requires proper procedures," Valdris replied. "We cannot act hastily." Lisa watched as Thex slumped in defeat. The Altarians were a peaceful people who had spent centuries building beautiful cities and art galleries on their small worlds. They had no military and no way to defend themselves against the Zephyrian war machine. After the session ended, Lisa walked slowly back to her transport ship. The corridor was filled with representatives discussing trade deals and vacation plans. No one seemed concerned about the Altarians. Her pilot, a young man named Danny Parker, greeted her at the ship's entrance. "How did it go today, Ambassador?" "Same as always," Lisa replied. "Lots of talk, no action. The flight back to Earth took 6 hours. Lisa spent most of it reading reports from their intelligence network. Earth maintained a small monitoring service that tracked galactic events, mainly to watch for threats to their farming operations. What she read made her angry. The Zephyrians had been systematically targeting smaller colonies for months. They would demand tribute, and when the colonies refused, Zephyrian forces would attack civilian targets. Hospitals, schools, water treatment plants. The kind of targets that would break a people's will to resist. The worst part was that it was all legal. The Galactic Council's laws were designed to prevent major wars between powerful species. Small colonies had very few protections. Lisa thought about Earth's response to the situation. They would probably send some food aid to the refugees and make a formal statement expressing concern. That was what Earth did. They grew food, they minded their own business, and they stayed out of galactic politics. It had not always been that way. When Lisa arrived at Earth, she took a transport down to the capital city of Geneva. The government buildings were simple and practical. surrounded by vast green fields that stretched to the horizon. Earth was the breadbasket of the galaxy, feeding billions of people across hundreds of worlds. She went straight to see President Ben Carter, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. His office was plain and comfortable, with windows that looked out over the wheat fields. "I saw the council session recording," Ben said before Lisa could speak. "The Altarians are in trouble." "The council will do nothing," Lisa replied. "They will form committees and hold meetings while the Zephyrians destroy everything." Ben nodded sadly. "That is what the council does. It is what they have always done." "We could help," Lisa said. "We have ships, we have resources. We also have commitments," Ben replied. "We promised to stay out of galactic conflicts. That promise has kept the peace for 3,000 years. Lisa knew he was right, but it still hurt. She had joined the diplomatic service because she believed Earth could make a difference in the galaxy. Instead, she spent her days watching terrible things happen while everyone pretended they could not be stopped. That evening, Lisa sat in her apartment and watched the news feeds from the attacked colonies. Families loading their possessions into cargo ships, children crying as they left the only homes they had ever known, medical workers trying to save burn victims with inadequate supplies. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Captain Jake Morrison, commander of the Earth Defense Force station orbiting Mars. They had served together during their military training, back when Earth still maintained a small defense force. "Lisa, I have been watching the news. This is exactly the kind of thing our ancestors fought to stop. How many more colonies have to burn before someone does something?" Lisa stared at the message for a long time before responding. "The council has procedures, Jake. We have to trust the system." But as she watched more reports of burning settlements and fleeing refugees, Lisa began to wonder if the system was worth trusting. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she remembered stories her grandfather had told her about the old days, when Earth had been very different, and when humans had been feared across the galaxy for very different reasons. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Mars Defense Station, looking out at the red planet below. The station was old, built nearly a century ago when Earth still worried about external threats. These days it served mainly as a way station for cargo ships and a training facility for the few young people who still wanted to join the Earth Defense Force. His crew of 32 men and women spent most of their time running simulations and maintaining equipment that had not been used in anger for generations. The weapons systems were still functional, but sealed behind multiple authorization codes that would take direct orders from Earth's government to unlock. Jake's second in command, Commander Lisa Hayes, approached him with a tablet in her hands. She was a sharp woman in her 30s who had joined the Defense Force because she wanted to explore space, not because she expected to fight anyone. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal," she said. "It is coming from the Altair sector." Jake took the tablet and read the message. An Altarian refugee ship was requesting emergency assistance. Their engines were failing, and they had wounded civilians on board. The transmission was weak and broken, but the desperation was clear. "How long would it take us to reach them?" Jake asked. 18 hours at maximum speed," Lisa replied. "But Captain, we do not have authorization to leave the Sol system. Protocol requires us to forward the distress call to the Council Rescue Service." Jake looked at the message again. The ship was called the Safe Harbor, and it was carrying 300 refugees from the destroyed colonies. Women, children, elderly people who had lost everything. How long for a council rescue ship to reach them? 48 hours minimum, Lisa said quietly. Jake closed his eyes. 48 hours was too long for a ship with failing engines and wounded passengers. By the time help arrived, they would be looking at wreckage and bodies. "Prepare the ship for departure," he said. "Captain, without authorization—" "I will take responsibility," Jake interrupted. "No one dies on my watch because of paperwork." 3 hours later, the EDF cruiser Vigilant dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates from the distress call. What they found made Jake's blood run cold. The safe harbor was drifting dead in space, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere. Debris surrounded the ship, including pieces that looked like they had been deliberately destroyed. And nearby, almost close enough to touch, was a Zephyrian attack ship. "They are not responding to our hails," reported Chief Engineer Ryan Torres from his station. "Life support is failing across multiple sections." Jake watched as the Zephyrian ship turned toward them. It was smaller than the Vigilant, but obviously built for war. Weapon systems that looked both advanced and well-maintained. The Zephyrian captain opened a communication channel. His face appeared on the main screen, showing the typical gray skin and red eyes of his species. "Human vessel, you are interfering in legal enforcement actions," the Zephyrian said. "Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," Jake replied calmly. "We are responding to a distress call from a civilian vessel." "Stand down," the Zephyrian laughed. "Earth Defense Force? You people have not fought a real battle in 3,000 years. Your weapons are probably museum pieces." Jake felt something hot and angry rising in his chest. What happened to that ship? "They were transporting illegal refugees," the Zephyrian said with a shrug. "We disabled their engines to prevent their escape. If some of them die during the arrest, that is not our problem." On the tactical display, Jake could see the safe harbor's life support failing. Red indicators showed hull breaches in the sections where the children and elderly were housed. "Commander Hayes, can we dock with that ship?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir, but the Zephyrian vessel is blocking our approach vector." Jake looked at his crew. They were good people, trained in rescue operations and basic defense. But they had never been in combat. Most of them had joined the Defense Force because it was a safe job that let them serve their planet. Dr. Amy Walsh, the ship's science officer and historian, approached his command chair. She was a small woman with brown hair who spent most of her time cataloging Earth's contributions to galactic culture. "Captain, I have been researching our ship's specifications," she said quietly. "The Vigilant is not as outdated as we thought." She handed him a data pad with technical specifications that made his eyes widen. The Vigilant had been built using technology that was apparently centuries ahead of current galactic standards. Its shields could absorb direct hits from weapons that would destroy most other ships. Its own weapons, if activated, could disable a ship the size of the Zephyrian vessel in minutes. "Why was this information classified?" Jake asked. "Because our ancestors were afraid of what other species would think if they knew how advanced our technology really was," Amy replied. Jake stared at the data for a long moment. Then he looked at the dying refugee ship and the Zephyrian vessel that was preventing them from helping. "Ryan, can you unlock our weapon systems?" The young engineer looked nervous. "Captain, that requires authorization codes from Earth Command." "The refugees will be dead in 20 minutes, Jake said. "I am giving you a direct order. Unlock the weapons." Ryan's hands shook as he entered the commands. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems that had been dormant for decades came online. The ship's power output increased dramatically as weapons capacitors began charging. The Zephyrian captain noticed the change immediately. "Human vessel, power down your weapons or we will consider it an act of war." Jake activated the ship's communication system. "This is Captain Morrison. You have 60 seconds to move away from that refugee ship or I will move you myself." The Zephyrian laughed again. "You have one small ship against the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender now and we might let you live." Jake counted down silently. When he reached 0, he nodded to Ryan. The Vigilant's main guns fired once. The energy beam struck the Zephyrian ship's shields and went through them like they were made of paper. The beam hit the enemy vessel's engine, sectioned and disabled it completely without destroying the ship or killing the crew. The Zephyrian captain's expression changed from amusement to shock, to fear in the space of 3 seconds. "Impossible," he whispered. "Commander Hayes, dock with the refugee ship," Jake ordered. "Medical teams to the airlock. We have people to save." As the rescue operation began, Jake watched the disabled Zephyrian vessel drift helplessly in space. Its crew was alive, but their ship would need weeks of repairs to move again. Dr. Walsh appeared at his side again. "Captain, I think we need to have a serious conversation about what Earth's military was really capable of, and why we stopped using those capabilities." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on the refugee families being brought aboard his ship. Children with burn scars, adults with broken bones and radiation sickness. People who had lost their homes and their loved ones to Zephyrian aggression. For the first time in his career, Jake Morrison understood why his ancestors had been willing to fight wars. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people needed protection, and sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to hit back harder than they hit you. As the last refugees were brought aboard, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He opened a communication channel to Earth Command. "This is Captain Morrison requesting immediate conference with Admiral Sullivan," he said. "We have a situation that requires her attention." Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office deep beneath the Swiss mountains, reading Captain Morrison's report for the third time. The underground facility had not been used for its original purpose in over 2,000 years, but the old command center still worked perfectly. The report was troubling on several levels. A Zephyrian attack ship had been firing on civilian refugees. Morrison had disabled it with a single shot from weapons that were supposed to be obsolete, and now the Zephyrian Empire was demanding an explanation for what they called an unprovoked attack on their forces. Kate was 62 years old and had spent her entire career managing Earth's small defense fleet. She had joined the service expecting to spend her time coordinating rescue operations and maintaining border security. She had never expected to face the possibility of actual warfare. Her aide, Colonel Mark Davis, entered the office with a stack of files under his arm. He was a serious man in his 40s who managed the day-to-day operations of Earth's military infrastructure. "Admiral, I have the files you requested," he said, placing the documents on her desk. "Everything we have on pre-peace accord military capabilities." Kate opened the first file and immediately felt a chill run down her spine. The documents described weapons and tactics that seemed almost impossible. Fleets that could destroy entire star systems. Ground forces that had conquered heavily defended worlds in a matter of hours. Strategic operations that had ended wars before the enemy even realized they were under attack. "Mark, is this information accurate?" she asked. "As far as we can tell, yes, ma'am," he replied. "Our ancestors were very good at warfare." "Extremely good, frighteningly good," Kate continued reading. The files described how human forces had ended the last galactic war by demonstrating that they could destroy any target, anywhere, at any time. They had not needed to use their full capabilities. The mere demonstration had been enough to convince every other species that fighting humans was suicide. "What happened?" Kate asked. "Why did we stop?" Mark pulled out another file. "According to the historical records, our government made a conscious decision to withdraw from galactic politics. They realized that human military capabilities were so advanced that other species would never feel safe, as long as we remained active." Kate read the final reports from Earth's last military campaign. Human commanders expressing concern that they were becoming too efficient at destruction. Civilian leaders worried that other species would unite against Earth out of fear. A deliberate choice to step back and let others manage galactic affairs. "So we chose to become farmers and diplomats," Kate said. "Yes, ma'am, and it worked for 3,000 years. Kate's communication system chimed. It was a priority message from President Carter's office. She accepted the call and the president's face appeared on her screen. "Kate, we need to talk," Ben said without preamble. "The Zephyrians have just attacked 2 more Altarian colonies. They are also demanding that we turn over Captain Morrison for trial as a war criminal. What is our response?" "Officially, we are deeply concerned and calling for an investigation," Ben replied. "Unofficially, I want you to come to Geneva immediately. Bring your senior staff and any records related to our pre-accord capabilities." 3 hours later, Kate sat in the secure conference room beneath the presidential palace. President Carter was there along with Ambassador Grant, who had just returned from an emergency council session, and Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Earth's chief scientist. "The situation is getting worse," Lisa Grant reported. "The Zephyrians have declared the entire Altair sector a military zone. Any ship that enters without permission will be considered hostile. They are effectively blockading 3-star systems." "What about the council?" President Carter asked. "Still debating," Lisa said with disgust. "The Keltarians want to form another committee. The Veldorians are calling for economic sanctions that will take years to have any effect. The smaller species are afraid to say anything because they might be next." Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. "Mr. President, I have been reviewing our archived military research. The weapons and defensive systems we developed before the peace accord are still functional. In fact, they are far more advanced than anything currently in use by other species." "How much more advanced?" the President asked. "Our ships could destroy the entire Zephyrian fleet without taking significant damage," Sarah said quietly. "Our ground forces could occupy their homeworld in less than a week. Our strategic capabilities could shut down their entire civilization without killing a single person, if we chose to be merciful." The room fell silent. Kate felt the weight of that information settling on everyone's shoulders. The question, President Carter said slowly, is whether we should use those capabilities. The Zephyrians are committing genocide, Lisa said. They are systematically destroying civilian targets to break the will of peaceful colonies. If we do nothing, millions of innocent people will die. And if we do something, Colonel Davis pointed out, every other species in the galaxy will remember why they were afraid of us in the first place. Kate looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leadership. These were good people who had spent their careers building peace and prosperity. They were farmers and diplomats and scientists, but they were also the inheritors of a military tradition that had once made Earth the most feared world in the galaxy. There is another option, she said slowly. We do not have to choose between doing nothing and revealing our full capabilities. We can respond proportionally. What do you mean? The president asked. We activate a small portion of our fleet, Kate explained. Enough to stop the Zephyrian attacks, but not enough to threaten other species. We help the Altarians defend themselves and then withdraw. Dr. Mitchell shook her head. Admiral, once we start down this path, there is no going back. The other species will want to know how we were able to defeat the Zephyrians so easily. They will demand explanations. Then we tell them the truth, President Carter said. We withdrew from galactic affairs not because we were weak, but because we were too strong. We hoped that other species could maintain peace without our interference. That experiment has failed. The president stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the peaceful Swiss countryside. Farms and villages stretched to the horizon. The same view that Earth's leaders had enjoyed for 3,000 years. Admiral Sullivan, I am authorizing you to reactivate the Third Fleet, he said without turning around. You have permission to use whatever force is necessary to stop the Zephyrian attacks on civilian targets. Kate felt her heart rate increase. The Third Fleet consisted of 12 ships that had been in storage for centuries. Each one was more powerful than most species' entire navies. Mr. President, are you sure about this? She asked. Ben Carter turned around and Kate saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. It was the same look that Captain Morrison had described seeing in his own mirror after rescuing the refugees. Admiral, our ancestors withdrew from galactic politics because they were afraid of what humans might become if we continued down the path of war, the president said. But there is something worse than becoming monsters, and that is standing by while others become monsters. Kate nodded and stood up. I will need 48 hours to bring the ships online and brief my crews. You have it, the president replied. And Admiral? When you go out there, remember that you are not just representing Earth. You are representing the idea that civilized beings have a responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. As Kate left the meeting, she thought about Captain Morrison and his crew, alone in space with a ship full of refugees and the knowledge that they had just crossed a line that Earth had not crossed in 3,000 years. Soon, they would not be alone anymore. The Zephyrian attack fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's outer colonies with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Corax commanded 15 heavy cruisers and 40 smaller attack ships, more than enough firepower to force the humans into submission. Earth's agricultural stations orbited peacefully around Jupiter and Saturn, producing food for billions of people across the galaxy. They had no shields, no weapons, and no defenses beyond a few obsolete patrol boats. At least that was what every intelligence report had said for the past 1,000 years. Corax opened a communication channel to the lead agricultural station. A middle-aged human woman appeared on his screen, wearing the simple brown uniform of a station manager. I am Admiral Corax of the Zephyrian Empire, he announced. You will surrender your facilities and submit to Zephyrian authority. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. The woman looked calm, almost bored. I am Station Manager Beth Rogers. Admiral, you are trespassing in Earth territorial space. You have 60 seconds to withdraw. Corax laughed. Human, do you see the size of my fleet? You have nothing that can threaten us. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Beth Rogers smiled slightly. Admiral, you are about to learn why Earth has been so peaceful for the last 3,000 years. It was not because we were afraid of war. It was because everyone else was afraid of us. The communication ended and Corax prepared to order the attack on the defenseless stations. That was when his sensor operator, a young Zephyrian named Grix, looked up from his console with confusion. Admiral, I am detecting energy signatures from the human agricultural stations, Grix reported. Very large energy signatures. Impossible, Corax replied. Those are farming platforms. The answer came 60 seconds later when the agricultural stations revealed their true nature. Massive weapon systems unfolded from structures that had appeared to be grain silos and processing plants. What Korax had thought were farming equipment were actually military installations that had been disguised for centuries. The Yain first volley from the Earth defense platforms destroyed 12 Zephyrian ships in as many seconds. The beams were so powerful that they went straight through shields and armor like they were not even there. The remaining Zephyrian vessels scattered, but there was nowhere to run. Captain Jake Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of the Vigilant, which had been joined by 11 other ships of the reactivated Third Fleet. Admiral Sullivan commanded from the flagship New Geneva, a massive vessel that had been built 3,000 years ago and still outclassed anything else in the galaxy. "Admiral, the Zephyrian fleet is attempting to retreat," reported Commander Hayes. "Negative." Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the communication system. "No Zephyrian ship leaves this system until we have an unconditional surrender." The human fleet moved with a precision that amazed even their own crews. Each ship knew exactly where to be and when to be there. The Zephyrians found themselves surrounded by vessels that seemed to anticipate their every move. Admiral Korax tried everything he knew. His ships were fast and maneuverable, designed for hit-and-run attacks against weaker opponents. But the human vessels were faster and more maneuverable, while also being heavily armed and shielded. It was like watching children with sticks try to fight trained soldiers with modern weapons. Dr. Amy Walsh monitored Zephyrian communications from her station on the Vigilant. "Captain, they are requesting reinforcements from their homeworld. Their admiral is reporting that Earth has revealed advanced military capabilities." Jake nodded. "Patch me through to their flagship." Admiral Korax's face appeared on the main screen. The arrogant Zephyrian leader now looked confused and frightened. "Impossible," Korax said. "You are farmers. You have been farmers for 3,000 years. "We were never farmers," Jake replied calmly. "We were warriors who chose to grow food instead of waging war. There is a difference. Your weapons, your ships, they are too advanced," Korax protested. "Where did you get this technology?" "We built it," Jake said simply. 3,000 years ago, when we realized that we had become too good at war. We withdrew from galactic politics because we were afraid of what we might do if we continued fighting." On the tactical display, Jake could see the remaining Zephyrian ships being systematically disabled by human forces. Not destroyed, but crippled so thoroughly that they would need months of repairs to be functional again. "This is a trick," Korax said desperately. "You could not have hidden this from the galaxy for so long." "We did not hide it," Jake replied. "We simply stopped using it. Every species in the galaxy knew what humans were capable of during the last Great War. Your own historical records should tell you how that war ended." Dr. Walsh looked up from her console. "Captain, I am receiving communications from across the galaxy. Word of this battle is spreading very quickly." Jake nodded. He had expected that. The galaxy's communication networks were fast and efficient. By now, every government and military leader would know that Earth had just destroyed a Zephyrian battle fleet without losing a single ship. Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the communication system again. "All Zephyrian vessels, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that fails to comply will be destroyed. The remaining Zephyrian ships surrendered immediately." 3 hours later, Jake sat in the conference room aboard the New Geneva with Admiral Sullivan and the other fleet commanders. The table was covered with reports from across the galaxy as news of the battle spread. "The Galactic Council has called an emergency session," reported Captain David Stone from the cruiser Liberty. "They want an immediate explanation of our actions. The Keltarians are demanding that we withdraw all military forces beyond Earth's solar system," added Captain Maria Santos from the destroyer Defiant. "They say our actions constitute a threat to galactic peace." Admiral Sullivan leaned back in her chair. "What about the Zephyrians? Their government is demanding the immediate release of their fleet," reported Colonel Davis via communication link from Earth. "They are also threatening to file war crimes charges against our commanders." Jake felt a bitter laugh escape his lips. "War crimes? They were attacking civilian agricultural stations. The Zephyrians claim they were conducting legal enforcement actions against human military installations," Admiral Sullivan said. They are saying we tricked them by disguising our weapons platforms as farming equipment. Which is technically true, Captain Stone pointed out. Our agricultural stations do have military capabilities that we never declared to the Council. Admiral Sullivan stood up and walked to the viewing port that showed Earth in the distance. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful, just as it had for 3,000 years. Gentlemen, we have a choice to make, she said. We can apologize for our actions, deactivate our military capabilities, and go back to being peaceful farmers who watch while tyrants destroy innocent colonies. Or we can accept the responsibility that comes with our capabilities. Jake thought about the Altarian refugees he had rescued, and about the reports of Zephyrian attacks on civilian targets across the galaxy. Admiral, what happens if we choose responsibility? Then we become what our ancestors were afraid we would become, she replied. The galaxy's police force, the species that other civilizations turn to when they cannot solve their own problems. Captain Santos spoke up. And if we choose to withdraw again? Then the Zephyrians continue their expansion. More colonies burn, and more innocent people die while the Galactic Council forms committees and holds meetings. Jake looked around the table at his fellow commanders. They were good people who had joined Earth's military service expecting to spend their careers maintaining the peace. None of them had wanted to become warriors. But sometimes, Jake realized, the galaxy did not give you the choice of what you wanted to become. Sometimes it only gave you the choice of what you were willing to accept. Admiral, he said quietly, what are our orders? The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 3,000-year history. Representatives from every major species had arrived within hours, and the chamber buzzed with nervous energy as everyone tried to understand what Earth's sudden display of military power meant for the galaxy. Ambassador Lisa Grant walked into the chamber wearing her dress uniform instead of her usual diplomatic clothes. The dark blue jacket with gold trim had not been worn by an Earth representative since the signing of the peace accord. The other ambassadors noticed immediately. Speaker Valdris called the session to order, but his usual calm demeanor was clearly strained. We are here to discuss the recent military actions taken by Earth forces against Zephyrian vessels in the Sol system. Ambassador Corex of the Zephyrian Empire stood up immediately. Despite his people's crushing defeat, he still projected arrogance and anger. The humans have committed an act of war against the Zephyrian Empire. They used hidden military installations to attack our fleet while it was conducting legal enforcement operations. Legal enforcement operations? Lisa stood up, her voice carrying across the chamber with a strength that surprised even her. You attacked agricultural stations that were feeding half the galaxy. You came to commit genocide, just like you have been doing to the Altarian colonies. The Altarians were harboring illegal refugees, Corex replied. The humans were concealing military installations in violation of galactic treaties. Lisa smiled coldly. Ambassador Corex, perhaps you should review the actual text of the peace accord that Earth signed 3,000 years ago. We agreed to withdraw our military forces from active galactic operations. We never agreed to disarm. A murmur went through the chamber as representatives began accessing their historical databases. Many of them had never actually read the original peace accord. Speaker Valdris looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Grant, are you saying that Earth has maintained military capabilities this entire time? Speaker Valdris, we have maintained the same military capabilities we had when we ended the last galactic war, Lisa replied. We simply chose not to use them. Ambassador Thex of the Altarian colonies stood up. His people had suffered terribly under Zephyrian attacks, but now there was hope in his voice. The human fleet saved 3 of our remaining colonies yesterday. Their ships arrived just as Zephyrian forces were preparing to destroy our last medical facilities. Impossible, Corex protested. Our intelligence reports show that the humans have no significant military presence outside their own system. Your intelligence was wrong, Lisa said simply. Earth has monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. We have ships in every major trade route. We have been watching and waiting for 3,000 years. Ambassador Vex of the Keltarian Republic, the species that had led the Council for centuries, finally spoke. Ambassador Grant, if Earth has possessed these capabilities all along, why did you allow the Zephyrian attacks to continue for so long? Lisa looked around the chamber at the faces of species that had grown comfortable with Earth's absence from galactic affairs. Because we hoped that you could handle your own problems. We hoped that civilized species could maintain peace without needing warriors to enforce it. And now? Speaker Valdris asked quietly. Now we know that hope was misplaced, Lisa replied. The Zephyrian Empire has spent months systematically destroying civilian targets while this council formed committees and held debates. Millions of innocent people have died while you argued about procedures. President Ben Carter's voice suddenly filled the chamber as he joined the session via communication link from Earth. His image appeared on the main display screen, and Lisa could see the resolve in his face. Honored representatives, President Carter began. 3,000 years ago, Earth withdrew from galactic politics because we realized that our military capabilities were a threat to peace. We were afraid that other species would never feel safe as long as humans remained active in galactic affairs. The chamber was completely silent now. We were wrong. The president continued. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice, and justice requires someone to be willing to enforce it. Ambassador Korex stood up again. Are you threatening the galaxy? No, President Carter replied calmly. We are making a promise. From this day forward, any species that targets civilian populations, commits genocide, or wages war against defenseless colonies will face the full military response of Earth. We will no longer stand by while innocents suffer. This is outrageous, the Keltarian ambassador protested. You cannot simply declare yourselves the galaxy's police force. Lisa stepped forward. We are not declaring ourselves anything. We are accepting a responsibility that we should never have abandoned. She activated her personal data pad and transmitted a file to every representative in the chamber. These are the complete specifications for Earth's current military capabilities. Our ship designs, our weapon systems, our strategic doctrines, everything. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as representatives began reviewing the data. Lisa watched their faces change from confusion to disbelief to fear as they realized the true extent of human military technology. This cannot be accurate, the Veldorian ambassador whispered. These capabilities would make you the most powerful military force in galactic history. We have been the most powerful military force in galactic history for 3,000 years, Lisa replied. We just chose not to use that power. Speaker Valdris was scanning through the data with wide eyes. Your ships could destroy entire fleets. Your weapons could sterilize planets. Your strategic capabilities could shut down our entire civilization. Yes, Lisa said simply. That is why we withdrew from galactic politics. That is why we became farmers and diplomats instead of warriors. We were afraid of what we might become. President Carter's voice filled the chamber again. But we have learned something important in the last few days. There is something worse than becoming monsters, and that is allowing others to become monsters while we stand by and do nothing. The Zephyrian ambassador looked around the chamber desperately. You cannot allow this. If humans return to active military operations, they will dominate the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire is no longer in a position to make demands, Lisa said coldly. Your fleet has been completely destroyed or captured. Your government has 48 hours to withdraw all forces from Altarian space and pay reparations for the damage you have caused. And if we refuse? Lisa's expression did not change. Then you will discover why every species in the galaxy used to be afraid of humans. Speaker Valdris cleared his throat nervously. Ambassador Grant, what assurance can you give that Earth will not abuse these capabilities? The same assurance we gave 3,000 years ago, President Carter replied. Earth has no interest in conquest or domination. We want to grow food and live in peace. But we will no longer allow that peace to be purchased with the blood of innocents. Lisa looked around the chamber one final time. The galaxy has a choice. You can accept human protection and enjoy true peace, backed by the certainty that aggressors will face overwhelming force. Or you can continue as you have been, forming committees and holding debates while tyrants destroy the defenseless. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Earth's position is simple. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will stop those who prey on the innocent. And we will enforce peace through strength, because we have learned that peace through weakness only leads to suffering. As Lisa walked toward the exit, Ambassador Thex of the Altarian colonies stood up. Ambassador Grant, on behalf of all the colonies that human forces have saved, thank you. Thank you for remembering that sometimes the only way to stop evil is to be willing to fight it. Lisa paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the representatives of 47 species, many of whom were still staring at the military specifications she had shared. "The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years, she said, but it has not been a just peace. Children have died while you debated. Colonies have burned while you formed committees. That ends now." The doors closed behind her as she left the chamber, and for the first time in 3 millennia, the galaxy began to remember what it felt like to have Earth as an active participant in galactic affairs. In the months that followed, the Zephyrian Empire withdrew from all occupied territories. The Galactic Council passed new resolutions protecting civilian populations, with enforcement mechanisms that actually worked. And throughout the galaxy, species that had grown comfortable with the idea that might made right began to remember what justice looked like when it was backed by overwhelming force. Earth returned to growing food and maintaining peace, but now when humans spoke of peace, the galaxy listened, because everyone remembered that true peace was not the absence of warriors, but the presence of warriors who chose to use their strength to protect rather than conquer. The age of committees and debates was over. The age of justice enforced by those strong enough to provide it had begun. And after 3,000 years of learning that peace through weakness led only to suffering, the galaxy finally understood the difference between peace and justice. Humanity had struck again. But this time they struck for protection rather.